What do you feel in the moment you first open your eyes to a world that has not yet learned to call itself a civilization, yet already pulses with the breath of something ancient and immense? You stand in the slow-burning dawn between the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, as soft mist clings to reeds trembling in the early light. A heron lifts into the air with a quiet, annoyed flap. Apparently you disturbed its morning routine, though it will forgive you eventually, and the warm wind tastes faintly of silt barley and a future waiting to be shaped. No roads, no kings, no engravings on tablets yet. Just you, barefoot, sinking slightly into the damp soil as the land itself seems to murmur, "Begin here." The horizon feels wide enough to swallow entire lifetimes. Across the floodplain, small clusters of huts, nothing more than woven reed shelters, huddle together like families seeking comfort. You watch smoke rising lazily from early hearths, the scent drifting toward you in thin ribbons. People emerge, rubbing their eyes, stretching, checking the sky as though reading a silent text only they can see. Maybe they are because the rivers teach their own kind of literacy: when to plant, when to wait, when to pray. A mainstream historical fact whispers through the scene. This region, later called Sumer, truly is among the oldest known cradles of urban life, forming city-states centuries before Egypt raises its first pyramids. And yet, despite the solemnity of this first light, there is already a quirk in the story. Far off, a fisherman ties an amulet made of a surprisingly familiar material, a bead shaped like a grinning goat. It's worn not for fashion but superstition, a tiny charm meant to keep river spirits from stealing his catch. You can't help but smile already, even at the dawn of organized life. People are people, and no one wants spectral fish thieves messing up their morning. As warmth spreads across your skin, you sense humanity shifting from wandering to settling. You feel it in the soil beneath your toes, tiny grains that will one day bake into bricks, bricks that will stack into walls, walls that will lift into temples, temples that will crown cities whose names echo across millennia. But here in this early hush, it's still delicate, still learning, still trying to balance the gifts and punishments of the rivers. Floods arrive unpredictably, nourishing the fields one year and sweeping away entire settlements the next. Historians still argue whether early canal systems began as carefully planned feats of engineering or as desperate improvised trenches dug after a particularly vengeful season. Your breath slows as you walk among the first farmers stirring from their shelters. They carry baskets made of twisted palm fibers, heading toward patches of cultivated soil where barley and emmer wheat cling to life. Their tools are simple flint blades, wooden plows pulled by slow, patient oxen, who seem to resent early mornings almost as much as you do. A thin boy chases a goat, trying to coax it away from the crops. The goat stares at him with the blank confidence of all goats everywhere, a small joke from the universe, reminding you that some things never change, no matter how ancient the world becomes. A woman approaches a patch of reeds and touches them thoughtfully as if assessing their readiness. Soon these reeds will be stripped, dried, tied, and transformed into the earliest structures of settled life. Homes that sway slightly in the wind, baskets that carry grain, mats that line sleeping spaces, and though no one suspects it yet, tools that will record the first human writing. The reeds right now, so ordinary, carry inside them the blueprint of future memory. The sun climbs higher, warming your shoulders, and the land reveals more of its subtle choreography. You see wild pigs darting between thickets. One snorts indignantly at you, though you swear you've done nothing offensive, and you catch glimpses of early shepherds guiding sheep across the plain. These animals will become symbols later pressed into the clay tablets of gods and kings, but for now they are simply breakfast in motion. You walk toward a cluster of huts where early cooperation is unfolding. People gather near a shallow pit filled with water, debating through gestures and sharp glances how to divide yesterday's fish haul. The discussion is tense but familiar, because even here at the dawn of civilization, resource management is as dramatic as any palace intrigue. A child wanders through the group holding a frog, proudly presenting it as though it is a profound solution to the argument. You catch yourself wanting to applaud. At least someone is proposing new ideas. A fringe tidbit drifts through your mind in some early Mesopotamian sites. Archaeologists have found curious small figurines with exaggerated eyes. Scholars debate whether they're votive offerings, protective symbols, or just the prehistoric equivalent of someone doodling wide-eyed characters for fun. Looking at the world around you, the anxious farmers, the mischievous children, the unpredictable rivers, you suspect that the figure's enormous eyes are simply a reflection of how wide-open life feels in this place. Everything is seen. Everything is uncertain. Everything is beginning. As you continue your slow, reverent walk, your senses become more attuned to the hum under your feet. It's the hum of transition, the moment when scattered families begin to recognize the value of staying, building, growing together. You feel the urge of human hands wanting to shape permanence out of mud and time. You feel the weight of future cities like Uruk, Lagash, and Eridu pressing faintly against the horizon of what will be. You even feel in the tiny tension between morning breeze and rising sun the distant throb of an idea that humans could control their environment, not merely endure it. You're not alone in sensing this shift. Nearby, an elder kneels in the dirt, drawing a simple map with a stick. Lines for canals, marks for fields, a cluster of circles where dwellings should be expanded. He pours it the frowns, erases half of it, then redraws it slightly askew. It is unmistakably the first urban planning meeting, with exactly as much uncertainty, revision, and arguing as modern ones. If someone brought clay coffee mugs, the illusion would be complete. A soft laugh escapes you, but it blends seamlessly into the rustling reeds and low animal calls around you. Humor feels perfectly at home in this place, even as you sense the immense solemnity of what's stirring here, the world's first true urban society, still fragile, still learning to stand without wandering. The sky brightens to a low, golden blaze, revealing the pathways between these early camps. They are not yet streets, but they will become streets. They are not yet history, but they will shape history. They are not yet civilization, but you can almost see the outline of it forming like a shadow cast before the object exists. And so you take one more slow step across the damp earth, letting the pulse of ancient Sumer settle into your bones. The rivers breathe, the people stir, the world shifts. And you, standing in the dawn, are invited to witness the first flicker of what humanity will become. You follow the soft paths shaped by countless bare feet, the earth tamped down by repetition rather than design, and each step draws you deeper into a landscape awakening to its own potential. The early settlements behind you hum like distant hives, but ahead you sense something different, an emerging rhythm, as if the land itself begins to think in longer arcs. The scent of wet clay and crushed reeds grows stronger, and the quiet murmur of people blending labor with hope accompanies you like a companion walking just out of sight. The first clay paths appear beneath your feet, not carved with intent, but formed from necessity where people walk most the ground remembers. You step onto one of these paths, feeling it hold the warmth of the rising sun. Along its edges, shallow channels guide water from the river toward fields that stretch like soft green carpets across the horizon. You pause, because here in these trickling veins of mud and water, you can practically hear the first heartbeat of civilization. A mainstream historical fact echoes through this moment. Sumerians pioneered some of the earliest large-scale irrigation systems, turning unpredictable floods into sustained agricultural abundance. But not everything aligned so neatly. A man nearby crouches over a canal, scratching his head, as water stubbornly refuses to follow his carefully dug route. He scowls at it, muttering what you suspect is the Bronze Age equivalent of "seriously" before jabbing it with a stick. The water responds by splashing him, which you're fairly sure counts as a win for the canal. He glances at you as if to say, "You saw nothing." You raise your hands in mock innocence. Humor survives even the earliest mud-splattered mornings. Villages grow more numerous the farther you walk. Huts become larger with mud-brick walls pressed and dried under the relentless sun. You brush your fingers along one such wall, feeling its warmth and roughness. The bricks carry handprints from their makers, literal fingerprints of ancestors, who never guessed that future scholars would excavate their homes with breathless excitement. A fringe tidbit drifts into your thoughts early. Sumerian bricks sometimes included bits of straw, not just for structure, but to help bind the clay more evenly, proof that even 6,000 years ago, people improvised like seasoned DIY enthusiasts. Approaching another cluster of dwellings, you see a family repairing the roof of their home. They work with determined coordination, lifting reeds, binding them with cords, and layering them in overlapping sheets. A young girl, probably too enthusiastic for her own good, stands atop the structure, shouting instructions down to the adults who pretend not to hear her. You realize you are witnessing early teamwork and early childhood bossiness. When a gust of wind sends a section of reeds tumbling onto one worker's head, the girl bursts into laughter, and you catch yourself laughing with her. Civilization, it seems, is built with equal parts effort and amusement. The clay paths twist toward a wider open space where people gather for reasons you can't decipher immediately. You edge closer, guided by curiosity and the steady thrum of communal energy. In the center, a group is mixing clay in a deep pit. They stomp it with bare feet, murmuring to each other in a cadence that's almost musical. From this mixture, they will shape bricks jars and the earliest tools of sedentary life. You step back just in time to avoid a particularly joyful stomp that sends a glob of clay flying past your ankle. So much for staying clean. On the far side of this open area, a man scratches symbols, simple lines, and impressions onto a smoothed patch of damp earth. His gestures are quick, purposeful. He's not writing, not yet, but there's something in the way he traces the ground that reminds you of what's coming. Planning. Counting. Organizing. Historians still argue whether these early impressions were for marking fields, keeping tallies, or simply doodles made while waiting for the clay to dry. You suspect the truth is all three. After all, humanity has a long tradition of mixing paperwork with distraction. A soft breeze carries the smell of tilled soil toward you, and for a moment you stand among the farmers preparing new ground. Wooden plows creak as oxen pull them in steady lines, carving furrows into the earth. These plows are simple, yet they reshape the world. You watch a farmer step back, wipe sweat from his brow, and inspect his work with pride that transcends time. The soil, dark and rich, promises yield and therefore stability. With stability comes growth, and with growth comes complexity. You feel it rising like a tide. You move along another path, this one firmer, more traveled. Children chase each other, leaping across puddles with shrieks that send birds scattering. Two boys attempt to race while carrying baskets of mud, only to trip spectacularly, leaving them rolling on the ground, cackling. Their mothers sigh heavily, but smile despite themselves. You witness the earliest version of the kids. Please stop breaking things dynamic, which feels timeless enough to anchor you firmly in the present moment, despite the ancient world surrounding you. As you walk, you notice something emerging: boundaries. Small walls not yet meant for defense, but for structure, marking gardens, storage spaces, communal areas. These lines become the bones of future cities. You trace the top of one low wall with your hand, sensing how even this simple division begins shaping behavior. Where people gather, where they trade, where they argue loudly until someone finally gives in. It's subtle but powerful. You're watching the human shift from wandering life toward mapped life, from temporary huts to semi-permanent neighborhoods. The afternoon light softens, and you stop near a canal where a group repairs a collapsed section. Mud sloshes as they rebuild the embankment, their movements measured and patient. A goat stands nearby, watching with an expression that suggests critical evaluation. You imagine the goat drafting performance reviews in its mind, and you have to stifle a laugh. But there is a serious truth here too. Irrigation is survival. One broken channel can threaten the entire season. You feel the tension in the workers' movements, the urgency hidden beneath their steady pace. Farther along, a small shrine sits beneath a cluster of palm trees. Someone has placed offerings, a handful of barley, a small painted stone, a fish head, staring skyward with a slightly judgmental look. You kneel and feel the cool shade wrap around you. Even before grand temples exist, spirituality threads through everyday life like water through reeds. Humans seek meaning as instinctively as they seek food. You sense early priests just beginning to emerge from the fabric of the community, though for now they're simply the people who remember the rituals. As the sun dips lower, casting stretched shadows across the clay paths, you feel the land settling into an evening hush. Villages glow with quiet fires. Pots simmer. Laughter drifts from doorways. It's modest, unpolished, and utterly profound the moment the world first realizes it can stay in one place and build. The first clay paths cradle your steps as you continue onward, deeper into what will become the cradle of civilization. You breathe in mud smoke and possibility, feeling each scent settle into your memory like the first lines on an unwritten tablet. You follow the clay paths as they narrow wind, and finally rise toward a place where the ground grows strangely firm, as though packed by more than mere footsteps. The air shifts warmer, thicker, carrying a scent of smoke mingled with something sweet, almost metallic. You sense it before you see it, an ascent, a pull, a vertical ambition in a world still mostly horizontal. The mud brick huts fade behind you, replaced by larger structures, whose shadows stretch across the earth like promises of power. Here in this stirring heart of early settlement, temples rise from dust. The first thing you notice is the mound, broad-layered, unmistakably intentional. Not a hill, not a natural rise, but a platform built by human hands, each layer of packed mud and brick lifting the structure closer to the heavens. Workers move across its surface like ants on an anthill, carrying baskets of clay, water, and reeds. Their movements form a rhythm, lift, step, dump, smooth, and you feel it pulse through your chest as though the ground itself keeps time. You climb slowly, your hands brushing the sun-warmed bricks, and the texture speaks of long hours, aching backs, and a conviction that something unseen watches from above. A mainstream historical fact whispers to you these early temple platforms, precursors to the full ziggurats of later millennia, were among the first monumental religious structures on Earth. They served not only as houses for gods, but as the beating heart of Sumerian city-states, centers of ritual storage and governance all in one. And here you stand at the cradle of that tradition, feeling the weight of belief and the birth of institutional power pressing gently but insistently against your senses. At the summit, a small shrine waits, humble but vibrating with sacred presence. Reeds woven into patterns hang from wooden beams. Clay figurines sit in careful rows, their eyes wide and unblinking. A bowl of offerings rests at the base of a stone slab. barley sprinkled with a touch of oil, a few dates, a small cup of beer that smells faintly sour. Perhaps fermentation is still more aspiration than science. You kneel, feeling the smooth, cool surface of the slab beneath your fingers, and a strange calm settles over you. Not fear, not awe, exactly, but the quiet feeling of being observed by something vast. A young priest approaches, his hair tied with a cord, and his arms coated in a thin dusting of clay. He nods at you, his expression serene, but also clearly exhausted. He gestures toward the construction below, explaining with subtle pride that each brick is shaped by the temple's workers, pressed with thumb marks to test consistency, then dried in the sun before being fitted into place. You follow his gaze downward and notice something you missed before each worker pauses every so often to murmur a small phrase under their breath, a protective invocation to keep the structure stable. A fringe tidbit drifts into your awareness. The Sumerians believed certain chants could strengthen mud brick walls, as though sound itself could fuse clay into permanence. The priest beckons for you to follow him to the edge of the platform. From this height, the settlement stretches in every direction. Fields shimmer in the distance. Huts cluster like pebbles around the temple mound. Paths converge here, all leading upward, and for a moment you realize this place is not merely a building, it is a gravitational center, pulling people, resources, and belief into orbit. You feel the first inklings of social hierarchy forming beneath your feet, subtle as the slow drying of clay. As you stand there contemplating the shifting world, a shout rises from below. A group of laborers has paused their work because a dog, small, wiry, self-important, has claimed a half-finished wall as its personal throne. It sits atop the brick's tail, flicking smugly, ignoring all attempts to coax it down. One worker bribes it with a scrap of bread. The dog sniffs disdainfully and remains. Another pretends to chase a squirrel, hoping the dog will follow. The dog yawns. You can't help it, you laugh. Even in the earliest sacred spaces, workers face the timeless challenge of temple construction delayed due to stubborn animal. Descending a level, you enter a larger structure attached to the main platform. This is the temple's storeroom, where barley grain, fish, and tools are kept under watchful eyes. Scribes, yes, the earliest seeds of scribal rolls hover over clay tokens, sorting them into small baskets. You watch one press a symbol into wet clay with a reed stylus. The marks are simple, but they carry meaning tallies of offerings, inventories of goods, records of who owes what to whom. Another historical debate hums around you. Historians still argue whether these clay tokens evolved into writing primarily for economic tracking or religious accounting. Here, watching the methodical movements of the scribes, you suspect the answer lies somewhere in the merging of both. A child darts past you, carrying a bowl of water toward the workers on the upper tier. They slosh half of it onto the ground, look mortified, then continue their sprint. A second joke emerges effortlessly in your mind. Hydration was clearly an issue even before portable water bottles existed. The child returns moments later, panting and triumphant, only to drop the now empty bowl with a loud clatter that draws a chorus of exasperated looks from the priests. You bite back a smile. You explore further. A group of women prepare offerings, grinding grain into fine flour with stones that scrape rhythmically. One pauses to stretch her back, muttering something about the gods not providing lumbar support. Even in ancient times, complaints find their way into sacred spaces. Another stirs incense over a small fire, sending fragrant smoke curling upward. You lean closer and catch an earthy, resinous scent that clings to your clothing like memory. Near the base of the temple mound, you find a secluded alcove carved into the earth. Inside, a simple painted mural shows a god. Maybe Inanna, maybe someone older, someone unnamed, standing with arms raised. The mural is crude but powerful. You trace the outlines, lightly feeling a connection, that transcends the millennia. Someone long ago stood here painting by lamplight, believing their work would bridge the mortal world and the divine. A third joke bubbles up as you spot a priest desperately shooing a group of goats away from a newly laid wall. One bold goat nibbles on a drying brick, crunching it with unsettling enthusiasm. The priest sighs with an expression that says, "Of all creatures to test my patience. Why goats?" You whisper a silent apology to future archaeologists who'll find bite marks and wonder whether they're part of a ritual. The shadows lengthen and torches flicker along the temple's edges. Workers begin to descend, leaving their tasks for tomorrow. The priest returns, placing his hand gently on the brick beside you, as if sensing your unspoken contemplation. Clay remembers, he murmurs. And suddenly you understand. These early temples are more than buildings. They are memory made solid stories, beliefs, hopes pressed into form by countless hands. As night begins to gather, you look once more over the village, the temple rising above it like a promise. The air vibrates with prayers, laughter, arguments over mislaid tools, braying goats, and the soft scrape of clay reshaping itself into permanence. From dust, humans are building something sacred, and you continue walking deeper into the unfolding world of Sumer. You descend from the temple mound with the lingering scent of incense still clinging to your hair, the clay dust settling softly on your palms like a reminder of the hands that built this place. The world below feels different now, more intricate, more intentional, as though the act of raising a temple has cracked open something inside the people who live here. Paths branch, fields widen, and conversations swell with the undercurrent of organization. But nothing defines this shift more than what you are about to witness the moment thoughts first learn to cling to clay, the moment cuneiform sparks to life beneath your fingertips. You make your way toward a cluster of reed-roofed structures near the temple's base. Laughter drifts toward you, unexpectedly lively for a place devoted to record-keeping, and when you step closer, you see why. A group of children sit in the dirt, practicing marks with blunt reeds. One boy proudly carves what he insists is a sheep, though it looks suspiciously like a lopsided teapot. A girl next to him snorts, and through pure mischief, draws an even more deformed sheep to show him how it really should look. Their teacher, a patient scribe with ink-stained fingers and the weary eyes of someone who has answered the same question 50 times today, rubs his temples and mutters something about whether the gods invented children as a divine test of endurance. You can't help but laugh. Apparently, office humor begins millennia before offices do. A few steps deeper into the scribal quarter, you find a broader structure with thick walls of sun-dried brick. Inside, the air is cooler, dim, and filled with the faint, earthy smell of wet clay. Scribes sit at long benches, their knees tucked beneath them as they press styluses fashioned from the same reeds used for roofs into soft clay tablets. You feel drawn to them as if some magnetic thread pulls your eyesight toward the movement of their hands. Their strokes are deliberate, patterned, wedge-angle impression press. Each mark a syllable of something new, a language not spoken, but shaped. A mainstream historical fact whispers across your memory. Cuneiform is one of the world's earliest known writing systems emerging here in Sumer, around 3400 to 3200 BCE. Born first from pictographs and then evolving into abstract signs, cuneiform allowed Sumerians to count grain record transactions, honor gods, and eventually shape poetry that would outlive those who wrote it. And here you are watching its infancy unfold with a quiet awe. A stern-looking master scribe gestures you closer. His stylus moves swiftly across a fresh tablet, leaving behind a neat pattern of impressions. He explains that these marks record quantities of barley owed to the temple offerings from farmers whose fields drink the temple's water. You imagine pursed lips and careful arguments that must accompany such accounting. The master scribe gently tilts the tablet toward you, and you touch its surface, feeling the softness of the clay, the faint warmth of being freshly molded. The impressions feel like footprints in wet sand, fragile, temporary, and yet destined to become permanent once baked. Historians still argue whether early writing emerged primarily from the need to track economic exchanges, religious offerings, or administrative decisions. Standing here observing the scribes tallying harvests, livestock, and temple goods, you feel the tug of all three forces braided together. Society is becoming too complex for memory alone. Clay becomes the mind's extension. Behind you, a young scribe stifles a groan. He has dropped his stylus for the third time, and each time he bends to retrieve it, the tablet on his lap tilts precariously. Finally, with the timing of an ancient slapstick routine, he bumps the edge of his tablet, and it flops face down in the dirt. The crisp symbols smear instantly. His expression crumples into despair until another scribe pats his shoulder with a sympathetic grin and says something that probably translates to, "It happens to everyone." Joke number 1 arrives naturally. Even the earliest bureaucracy comes with paperwork disasters. As you move further inside, the walls begin to display practice tablets, hundreds of them, lined in shelves like a silent chorus. Some show neat, refined symbols etched by steady hands. Others are scratched with chaotic, shaky marks that suggest either beginners or someone who had far too much temple beer the previous night. You pick up a small tablet on the lowest shelf. It contains only one symbol repeated 27 times, the earliest known homework assignment. You send a silent message of solidarity across time to the student who created it. A fringe tidbit flits through your awareness. Some early tablets record not only inventory and administrative notes, but also very human complaints. Archaeologists have uncovered tablets where scribes mock their peers' handwriting or grumble about difficult assignments. You imagine those scribes rolling their eyes dramatically, proof if ever needed that the first written words were not exclusively noble. A woman approaches from the back room, carrying a newly shaped lump of clay on a wooden board. She sets it on a bench, kneads it with strong fingers, then smooths its surface until it gleams like river mud at sunset. She hands you a stylus, lightweight, warm, familiar, and nods for you to try. You hesitate only a heartbeat before pressing the stylus into the clay. The sensation surprises you, soft enough to yield yet firm enough to push back. Your first symbol wobbles, the angles a bit crooked. One scribe observes your attempt, raises an eyebrow, and gives you a polite smile that says, "Not terrible for a beginner, but don't quit your day job." You laugh silently. Joke number 2. Once your tablet is set aside for drying, you step out into the sunlight where more scribes gather near the entrance. They discuss matters ranging from crop predictions to the difficulty of training apprentices who keep falling asleep during lessons. One mentions a dream that the goddess Nisaba, patron of writing, appeared to him holding a clay tablet glowing with fire. Another scribe teases him, asking whether the goddess also scolded him for his terrible handwriting. Their banter drifts into the air, light and affectionate. You wander toward a smaller building decorated with painted clay cones. Inside, a teacher leads an advanced lesson. Students sit cross-legged, copying signs for trade agreements and legal declarations. The scribbles are finer here, more confident. The students' faces are illuminated by oil lamps, their eyes glimmering with concentration. You sense that these are future record-keepers of cities not yet built, the minds who will anchor societies with symbols shaped from wet earth. Then, unexpectedly, a boy whispers to his neighbor, pointing to a sign he claims looks exactly like a fish trying to dance. The neighbor chokes back laughter, disrupting the solemn atmosphere. The teacher glares so fiercely that the room freezes. When the boys sink down in silence, their expressions sheepish, you feel a ripple of amusement. Joke number 3 settles into place, the perfect balance to the mystery of the moment. Outside, the sun begins to lower, staining the sky with red and gold. A group of scribes gather to place tablets near a fire, transforming fragile script into hardened memory. Flames dance across the surfaces, casting flickering patterns that resemble the very symbols they preserve. You watch the tablets bake, knowing these will endure centuries longer than the hands that shaped them. As you stand in the glow of firelight, you feel that writing is no longer a series of marks. It's a bridge between minds, between generations, between the living and the dead. And tonight, as the stars drift into view, you sense the spark of cuneiform illuminating the darkness like constellations rising for the first time. You leave the scribal quarter with the weight of fresh clay dust on your hands, its earthy texture reminding you of the marks you made, however clumsy, however fleeting. The village hums softly around you, yet the energy has shifted no longer. Simply the bustle of farmers, builders, or scribes at work, but a steadier, deeper pulse. Something in the air thickens as evening approaches the awareness that not all decisions are made in open fields or beside canal banks. Power like clay must be shaped. And so you follow the murmurs that thread through the settlement, guiding you toward the places where kings' councils and quiet deals begin to take root. You step into a broad courtyard between two larger structures, neither quite a palace nor a temple, but something in between. This is where elders gather, where disputes are weighed, where the earliest forms of civic order take shape. The ground here is swept clean, the walls adorned with simple painted lines that mark boundaries of authority. You sense it the moment you enter. This is no ordinary meeting place. This is the cradle of governance, still rough-edged, but unmistakably purposeful. A group of men and women sit in a circle, their mats arranged with near mathematical precision. At the center stands a clay jar, brimming with water, an offering to cool the tempers that sometimes flare during debate. One elder, a dignified woman with streaks of gray in her braided hair, speaks with measured calm. Her voice carries the authority of someone who has lived through more floods than most here have seen seasons. She describes an argument between neighboring families over a stretch of irrigated land. Hands clasp brows, furrow voices rise and fall in waves. You stand at the edge of the gathering, watching as consensus slowly emerges, not through force, but through a choreography of persuasion. You absorb the scene with reverence. A mainstream historical fact anchors it. Sumerian city-states developed some of the world's earliest legal frameworks, councils, and judicial practices. Before stone steles and formal codes, justice was spoken aloud, debated in these very kinds of circles. And now you are close enough to feel the warmth of breath as decisions take shape. A soft chuckle pulls your attention to the far side of the circle, where a man leans toward his neighbor and whispers something about how the gods themselves probably argue over irrigation lines. His neighbor snorts far too loudly, drawing a dozen irritated glares. The man coughs and pretends to study his sandals. You smile. Joke number 1 arrives disguised as political commentary, proving that even at the dawn of civic order, committees inspire comedic relief. As the council disperses, people mill around, exchanging quiet words and subtle glances. You notice a younger man lingering in the shadows near the wall. His tunic is woven more finely than most, and his sandals are dust-free, a sign he has walked here under protective escort. When he steps into the fading light, you see the faint mark on his arm, a small painted emblem representing the temple's authority. He approaches the elder woman from the council, bows slightly, and hands her a tablet. Fresh clay still damp at the edges. You tilt your head to see the symbols. They record a gift of barley from the temple granary to support families affected by the recent flood season. The boy speaks quietly. The temple wishes to show its goodwill. She nods, her expression unreadable. You realize you're witnessing an early negotiation between secular elders and religious administrators, a delicate balancing act of influence. Historians still argue whether temple authority or civic councils held greater sway in early Sumer, and here you feel the debate breathing in real time. Walking deeper into the administrative quarter, you find a low building with thick wooden beams supporting its roof. Inside, a group of men sit cross-legged behind clay tables, their bowls of beer and bread left half-finished as they lean over maps scratched into the dirt. These are the early city officials, overseers of canals, granaries, labor rotations. One man mutters about a canal breach to the east. Another insists that a specific family owes additional workforce contributions for failing to maintain their assigned section of embankment. The conversation grows heated. Suddenly, a goat, yes, another goat, wanders into the room as if summoned by the collective tension. It nosily sniffs the beer bowls, then nudges a clay tablet across the floor with its nose. The officials break mid-argument to shoo it away, but the goat stands stubborn as a deity. Finally, a younger official waves a piece of bread, luring the goat outside with all the dignity of an exasperated intern. Joke number 2 settles elegantly. Power structures may be forming, but goats respect none of them. You step outside with the officials as they regroup and disperse. One man lingers, rubbing his brow. He glances at you, recognizing you as an observer. Every season, he sighs, the rivers give and take. And every season we must negotiate their moods and each other's. His voice is soft, steady, carrying the unexpected wisdom of someone who manages more emotion than water. He gestures toward the west, where the river glints in the twilight. The gods rule from above, but people rule because they must. You let his words hang in the air, tasting the truth in them. Next, you follow the murmurs of another gathering, a smaller, more secretive cluster of figures behind a worn storage building. Here the mood shifts. Conversations drop to hushed tones. A small fire flickers at their center. One man, tall and lean, with a sharp gaze, discusses reallocating grain before the temple can claim its share. Another counters, quietly warning that the priests have grown suspicious. You sense immediately these are the quiet deals, the negotiations that happen behind the scenes, shaping power just as surely as councils or temples. A fringe tidbit whispers into your mind. In several Sumerian sites, archaeologists have found clay envelopes with tokens sealed inside to ensure honest record-keeping. Sometimes those tokens represent goods, other times debts or secret agreements. Watching these men exchange a tablet marked with faint, hastily scratched signs, you suspect you have glimpsed the human reason behind such envelopes: security, secrecy, trust made tangible. As you observe the quiet gathering, a boy suddenly bursts into the circle, carrying a small jug. "You forgot this," he shouts, startling everyone. The men flail in all directions, one nearly toppling into the fire. The boy blinks, confused by the chaos he caused, then shrugs and wanders off. You clap a hand over your mouth. Joke number 3 lands perfectly, relieving the tension with the kind of unintended comedy only children can deliver. The circle slowly reforms, though their voices remain softened, caution heightened. You step back, giving them space, and feel the moon rising over the settlement. Its pale glow reveals the intricate weave of authority forming around you, temple council. Officials, negotiators, each tries to guide the growing society without knowing exactly how. Each improvises, guessing their way through a world changing too quickly to fully grasp. You walk, letting the sounds of evening governance fade behind you. You feel civilization crystallizing around you, not as rigid hierarchy, but as a blend of cooperation, ambition, rivalry, and diplomacy. Here, kingship is still budding, councils still powerful, and decisions still shaped not by one voice but by many. You sense kings will soon rise from these negotiations, but not yet, not while the rivers hold the final say. Ahead, The clay paths widen, leading you toward a city stirring on the horizon, Uruk. Authority will amplify there. Power will condense. But for now, you continue forward with the whispers of council debates, still echoing in your steps, carrying you deeper into the heartbeat of Sumer. The road to Uruk stretches before you, like a living vein pulsing with footsteps, shouts, and the persistent rumble of carts rolling over hardened clay. You sense it long before you see it, the thrum of something immense, something unlike the quiet villages and scattered temples you've known so far. Here the air is denser, full of dust and ambition. You inhale the scent of roasting grain, drying fish, and fresh clay bricks still steaming faintly from their kilns. The world is shifting beneath your feet, and you are stepping directly into the rising roar of the first true city. Uruk does not reveal itself all at once. At first you glimpse only its outskirts, clusters of workshops, fields of barley and flax buzzing with laborers and canals that cut through the earth like deliberate strokes of ink. But as you move further along the path, the horizon swells with structures, walls, towers, platforms, each rising higher than anything you've yet seen in this ancient land. Sunlight strikes their surfaces, turning them into molten silhouettes. You pause, breath catching in your throat. This is no village. This is humanity learning what scale means. A mainstream historical fact glimmers through your awareness. Uruk is one of the world's earliest and largest cities, flourishing around 3200 BCE and reaching tens of thousands of inhabitants, an unimaginable number for its time. And now you walk its threshold as if drawn by gravity itself. As you pass beneath the shadow of its city wall, thick, tall, and etched with faint traces of ancient repairs, you're greeted by a cacophony that feels almost musical. Vendors shout the day's prices. Donkeys bray indignantly at being overworked. A pair of potters argue about whose kiln is hotter. You assume neither has scientific proof. Meanwhile, a woman with serious determination elbows through the crowd, carrying a towering stack of reed baskets, shouting for anyone to get out of her way. You sidestep hurriedly. You've learned that Sumerian street traffic requires equal parts agility and respect for women wielding large portable objects. You step into the main street, if such a thing can be called a street, for it spills in every direction like water breaking into rivulets. Stalls line both sides, offering jars of oil, heaps of barley, woven mats, fish fresh enough to still look offended by their situation, and jewelry made of copper and lapis lazuli that sparkles even in the dusty air. Children weave between the legs of adults, laughing as they dart after each other with sticks that are clearly imaginary spears. Their game ends abruptly when a vendor threatens to tan their hides. They scatter as fast as startled birds. Joke number 1 alights gently on your tongue. The density of people is intoxicating. Artisans chisel stone cylinders into seals, tiny masterpieces of myth and identity. Their hands move with practiced precision, carving lions, suns, and flowing script into the surface. One artisan invites you to watch more closely. He rolls a finished cylinder across wet clay, revealing an intricate band of symbols and figures that seem to dance in unison. You marvel at the result. He beams, tapping the seal proudly before muttering about his apprentice who accidentally carved a goat with 6 legs last week. The apprentice working nearby pretends not to hear, but his ears turn bright red. Joke number 2 slips in naturally. As you drift deeper into the city, the soundscape shifts. Hammers strike metal in steady rhythm. Looms clatter as women weave patterned cloth with astonishing speed. Large vats bubble with brewing beer, filling the air with a yeasty aroma that somehow manages to be both comforting and vaguely suspicious. Workers haul clay jars along ramps leading to storage complexes bigger than any building you've seen so far. The organization of it all, the specialization, the energy, the sense of purpose wraps around you like a tide rising fast. Historians still argue whether Uruk's explosive growth was driven more by trade temple authority or agricultural surplus. Walking through these bustling streets, you sense the answer lies in all these forces intertwining like threads on a loom. People here do not simply survive, they produce, innovate, and exchange at a scale that feels almost futuristic by ancient standards. Your feet carry you toward the monumental center, the Iana district. Temples rise here in layers upon layers, each structure built atop older ones like geological strata of belief. Columns carved with elaborate patterns catch your eye, and walls plated with cone mosaics shimmer faintly in the setting sun. You run your fingertips along the cool surface of one wall, the embedded colored cones forming geometric designs that seem to pulse with symbolic meaning. Nearby, a priest directs workers carrying offerings into the temple storehouse. Barley, honey, tools, textiles, amphorae of beer. The temple's wealth is vast, its storage rooms filled with goods that feed not only the gods, but the people who serve them. A man whispers to you that the temple distributes rations to workers daily, a system as complex as any modern payroll. You imagine someone in the future trying to navigate early Uruk's HR department, and the thought nearly makes you laugh aloud. A procession begins behind you. Drums beat slow and resonant. A group of temple musicians passes playing lyres crafted of polished wood and gleaming metal. Their music vibrates through your bones, deep hypnotic blending with the murmurs of the crowd. At the center of the procession walks a figure in ornate robes, tall headdress rising like a crescent toward the sky. This is a priestess of the goddess Inanna, the patroness of Uruk. You feel her presence like a shifting weight. Her steps measured, her gaze steady. She stops near a crowd gathered around a storyteller. You join them as the storyteller raises his arms, voice booming as he recounts tales of heroes and gods. His gestures grow wild, his face animated, drawing laughter and awe in equal measure. Behind him, a child imitates his movements with exaggerated flair, until the child stumbles backward into a fisherman's basket full of wriggling fish. Chaos ensues. Fish flop everywhere. The crowd erupts in laughter, even the priestess smiles faintly. Joke number 3 completes its graceful arrival. The sun sinks lower, staining Uruk in deep gold. For a moment you stand at the intersection of a dozen converging paths, people brushing past you in relentless waves. Merchants negotiating, builders hauling bricks, priests chanting, artisans carving, children shouting, goats bleating. Everything overlaps in an intoxicating swirl, and the city breathes around you alive, hungry, magnificent. And as dusk settles, torches ignite along the streets, turning the pathways into rivers of flickering amber light. You walk these glowing veins, feeling your heartbeat sync with the pulse of Uruk itself. For the first time, you understand the power of an urban center not just as a place, but as an engine, a roaring, living force that reshapes everyone within its reach. You continue walking deeper into the night-brightened streets where myth and commerce walk side by side. And Uruk, thunderous and unashamed, welcomes you into its endless, exhilarating storm. The night of Uruk fades into a pale, luminous dawn, and when you open your eyes again, the city already hums with purpose. Merchants call out to early customers, traders inspect their wares with the precision of surgeons, and boatmen shout across the canal as they load goods into vessels shaped like bulbous half-moons. The air pulses with direction movement, outward movement, inward, a kind of economic heartbeat that keeps the city alive. You sense it immediately. Uruk does not end at its walls. It stretches far beyond them along paths carved by wheels, hooves, and the long, slow glide of riverboats. And so you follow those paths, letting the flow of commerce draw you toward the merchants of the endless routes. You begin in the harbour district, where the morning sun casts bronze streaks across the water. Dockworkers heave crates of dried fish, jars of oil, bundles of reeds, and baskets of dates onto wooden platforms, slick with river spray. The smell is sharp brine tar and the faint sweetness of fermenting grain. A man with arms like tree trunks stands knee-deep in the canal, guiding a barge loaded with clay jars marked with cuneiform abbreviations. Oil, barley, beer. He bellows at two apprentices who are attempting unsuccessfully to stack the jars without dropping them. Naturally, one slips free, splashes into the water, and bobs there like a confused turtle. The apprentices freeze in horror while the barge master groans into his hands. Joke number 1 arrives with a watery plop. You step onto the packed earth of a riverside lane where traders gather in clusters like schools of fish. Some wear tunics dyed vibrant shades of red and blue, colors rare enough to signal distant origins. Others carry goods wrapped in animal skins or bound with intricate knots that reveal specific cultural traditions. One trader, his beard trimmed into tidy curls, gestures proudly toward his wares, gleaming beads of carnelian from far eastern lands polished smooth by hands you will never meet. Another lifts a chunk of lapis lazuli, the deep blue stone shimmering with golden flecks brought from the mountains of what will one day be Afghanistan. A mainstream historical fact settles quietly into the scene. Sumerians were among the earliest long-distance traders, creating networks that stretched across the Persian Gulf, the Zagros Mountains, Anatolia, and even the distant Indus Valley. You watch these networks in motion, not abstract routes on a scholar's map, but real hands exchanging real goods under the hot Mesopotamian sun. Near you, a merchant in a striped shawl haggles with a woman selling bolts of wool cloth. Their negotiation is a dance argument, counter-argument, raised eyebrows, feigned offense, and finally reluctant agreement. She wraps several lengths of cloth around his arm with theatrical flourish, then pats his cheek as though congratulating him on the privilege of paying her price. The merchant sighs dramatically, but you catch a small smile hiding in his beard. You wander toward the loading ramp, where donkeys are being prepared for caravans. The animals stand patiently, well, as patiently as donkeys ever do, while handlers tie baskets of grain, jars of oil, and bales of textiles to their sides. One donkey, perhaps sensing your quiet amusement, turns its head, fixes you with a long, contemplative stare, and loudly brays in your face. Several traders laugh. You bow to the donkey with exaggerated respect, and someone mutters that the creature probably thinks itself king of the caravan. Joke number 2 lands with the weight of a very opinionated animal. As you leave the cramped harbour lane, the city opens into a wide market square where travellers from distant lands gather. Their clothing scents and languages vary wildly, proof of Uruk's magnetic pull. You overhear snatches of conversation, someone praising the quality of Sumerian beer, another complaining that the mud-brick inns are still too humid, someone else insisting that he once saw a fish in the Gulf so large it could swallow a canoe whole. Historians still argue whether Sumerians truly believed in giant sea monsters or whether such tales were just the creative exaggerations of bored sailors seeking attention. Listening to these storytellers, you suspect it was both. At the center of the square stands a small kiosk where a scribe records incoming and outgoing shipments. He glances up as a foreign trader presents a clay tablet smudged from travel. The scribe studies it, squints, wipes it clean with the edge of his tunic, then stamps it with a tiny cylinder seal to confirm its legitimacy. You watch the imprint, 2 lions flanking a palm tree, appear on the clay surface with crisp detail. The scribe hands it back with a nod. Laws, commerce, and memory all entwine here, pressed into clay just as firmly as they were back in the scribal school. You follow a caravan moving its slow, rhythmic way through the streets. The merchants chat casually, discussing weather patterns, foreign dialects, and the challenges of crossing salt flats without losing every ounce of their sanity. One jokes that if a demon ever tried to drag him into the underworld, he'd ask it first to help carry his trade goods. Joke number 3 surfaces effortlessly capturing the spirit of traders who meet hardship with humor, stubborn enough to outlast sandstorms. The caravan finally passes through Uruk's gates. You follow for a while along the dusty road stretching outward into the open plain. The horizon feels wider here, touched by the shimmering promise of distant lands. You imagine these merchants trudging through deserts and marshes, mountains and river deltas, their footsteps stitching invisible threads across continents. They bring back more than goods, stories, songs, techniques, and ideas that will seep quietly into Sumerian life, like dye into cloth. You return toward the city, listening to the riverboats creak in their moorings. A fisherman repairs a net nearby, his fingers moving with practiced precision. He tells you unprompted that sometimes strange items wash downstream: carved stones, painted shells, even the occasional foreign amulet. He holds one up, a tiny piece of shaped bone etched with a pattern you don't recognize. He winks as he offers it. A gift from the world, he says. It always comes to Uruk. As the sun dips lower, casting copper light across the market, you feel the pull of these endless roots. They bind the world into a web of exchange, long before roads are paved or borders drawn. They feed temples, fill granaries, enrich artisans, and expand the very idea of what is possible. You walk slowly back through the bustling square, the sounds of barter and movement swirling around you like wind. And with each step you feel something profound. Sumer is no longer a single settlement or even a collection of city-states. It is part of a vast network, a world in motion. You turn toward the inner streets once more, sensing that trade will not only bring prosperity, but conflict. And the rising hum of distant drums hints that your next steps will carry you toward bronze battle and the fragile lines that divide peace from power. The last echoes of the bustling market fade behind you as you walk along the dusty road that skirts Uruk's massive wall. Something shifts in the air, heavier, sharper, tinged with the metallic scent of heated bronze. It curls into your nostrils and settles on your tongue like a warning. The merchant's laughter, the donkey brays, the temple chants all soften, replaced by a slow, rhythmic clanging that reverberates through the ground beneath your feet. You follow the sound instinctively, as though guided by an invisible thread, and soon you see it, the forge district glowing like a constellation brought down to earth. The smell hits you first, smoke and hot metal woven into a thick, unbroken cloud. Sparks leap from furnaces that roar like domesticated beasts, illuminating the silhouettes of men and women hammering glowing metal on stone anvils. A bronze ingot emerges from one of the furnaces, gleaming molten white at the center, fading to gold at the edges. Two workers coordinate with uncanny precision as they lift it with long wooden tongs, their faces shining with sweat. When they set it on a flat stone, the metal hisses, sending up a small cloud of steam that billows outward like a sigh from the earth itself. A mainstream historical fact weaves itself through this fiery scene. By the early 3rd millennium BCE, the Sumerians had mastered bronze metallurgy, combining copper with tin to create stronger, sharper tools and weapons. And here you stand at the birthplace of this transformative craft. You draw closer to a small workshop where a blacksmith shows a young apprentice how to shape a bronze blade. The apprentice swings his hammer with enthusiasm, as in far too much enthusiasm, and misses the blade entirely, hitting the anvil with such force that he nearly loses his grip. The blacksmith sighs, muttering something that sounds suspiciously like, "If only the gods granted patience with bronze." You stifle a laugh. Joke number 1 rings bright in the smoke-heavy air. As you continue wandering, you notice racks of spearheads cooling by the workshop entrances. Rows upon rows of them, their blades glinting like teeth. Shields of wood reinforced with bronze hang nearby their surfaces, carved with protective symbols, stars, zigzags, and animal motifs meant to ward off danger. The people of Uruk are preparing not for celebration or ceremony, but for conflict. Historians still argue whether this surge in weapon-making was driven by intercity rivalries, protection of trade routes, or internal shifts in political power. The evidence is scattered across tablets, ruins, and battle depictions, but the truth feels more complicated. Perhaps it is all these things and the restless human desire to control destiny, in a world where rivers and rivals both loom unpredictable. Moving away from the Forge district, you enter a training ground. Dust rises under the feet of men practicing combat drills. They move in coordinated formations, shields, raised spears, outward feet, pounding the earth in unison. The instructor strides among them, shouting corrections. One man's spear tilts downward. The instructor flicks it back up with the blunt end of his own weapon, then fixes him with a glare so fierce it could sharpen metal on its own. The man straightens instantly, cheeks reddening. Nearby, a group of youths practice slinging stones. One boy whirls his sling with too much flair, looses the stone at the wrong angle, and accidentally pelts a nearby officer's water jug. The vessel shatters with a dramatic splash. Silence descends. The boy freezes. The officer stares at him with raised brows. Then, after an agonizing pause, the officer begins to laugh. The others join in their amusement, flooding the training ground like a sudden rainstorm. Joke number 2 lands, breaking the tension, as if the gods themselves stepped in to lighten the mood. Beyond the training yard, you reach the city's ramparts. The wall looms above you, thick layered and studded with defensive towers. Climbing the staircase to its summit, you look out over the sprawling plain. The wind cools your sweat-damp skin. From this height you see the patchwork of fields that feed Uruk, the canals glinting like silver threads, and the narrow roads stretching toward neighboring city-states, Lagash, Kish, Umma. Each one a potential ally, each one a potential adversary. A small group of guards stand on the rampart, leaning casually against their spears. One invites you to sit with them. You share quiet conversation as the wind whistles around you. They speak of border skirmishes, of stolen sheep, of accusations that one city diverted too much river water. Wars start. One guard says thoughtfully, not because the gods decree it, but because people forget how to share. Another adds, and because someone always wants more fields. You nod. The simplicity of their statements carries the weight of truth. A fringe tidbit flutters in some ancient texts, suggest that early Sumerian warriors sometimes wore cloaks decorated with feathers, believing the attire would confuse enemies or intimidate them. You imagine a battlefield filled with men dressed like disgruntled birds, and before you can stop yourself, a laugh escapes. One guard glances over amused. Thinking of something funny, he asks. You shrug. Just picturing warriors who look like they were attacked by an over-enthusiastic flock. The guards laugh with you. Joke number 3 settles warmly between you all. As the sun dips toward the horizon, casting the world in a burnished glow, you descend the rampart and follow a path leading out of the city. A caravan of armed guards marches past you, their bronze weapons gleaming, their footsteps heavy with purpose. A chariot rolls by, wooden wheels reinforced with bronze bands. The driver clicks his tongue, urging the horses forward. Dust swirls behind them, blurring their forms until they resemble mythic figures riding into legend. You walk a little farther and find a quiet spot overlooking the plain where evening shadows stretch like long fingers. You watch as distant fires flicker a small settlement preparing for night. The stillness is deceptive. Beneath the surface, tensions stir like sleeping predators. Even now, the balance of power between city-states wavers, each seeking advantage. You feel it in your bones. The age of bronze brings more than tools. It brings borders, armies, and the first whispers of empire. The world grows sharper with edges that can cut. And as the stars awaken overhead, you rise, letting the night wind brush gently across your face. Ahead past conflict and clashing ambitions. Stories wait stories of gods, heroes, and the fragile hearts of those who try to fathom the cosmos. You turn back toward Uruk, toward the next pulse of civilization, where sacred stories begin to walk beside you. Night descends over the plain like a slow-moving veil, softening the dust and dimming the clangor of the forges. Uruk's fires flicker behind you, but your feet carry you toward a quieter glow. Lamplight spilling from a courtyard where people gather in a loose semicircle. The air feels different here, less urgent, more expectant. You sense it immediately, a shift so subtle that your breath slows without you commanding it. For the first time in many days, the noise of trade construction and marching boots fades behind you. Here in this pool of warm light, sacred stories wait stories that walk beside you, whispering through the night. A storyteller stands at the center. Tall and slender, draped in a shawl patterned with stars and crescents. His face is lined with the gentle creases of someone who has spent decades squinting into firelight while unraveling truths too slippery for daylight. He beckons you to join the circle. You sit among families, elders, wide-eyed children clutching each other's hands. A quiet hush settles, punctuated only by the crackle of oil lamps and the occasional stubborn bleat of a wandering goat from a nearby stall. You close your eyes for a moment, and the story begins. His voice flows like a river cutting through old stone. He speaks of the primordial sea of swirling darkness, of the first gods rising from the deep. His hands shape worlds in the air, fingers tracing the movements of deities who tread where mortals cannot. You lean forward, caught in the rhythm. A mainstream historical fact whispers beneath the tale Sumerian mythology. One of the earliest surviving mythic traditions served not just to entertain, but to explain the cosmos, the floods, the unpredictable sky. These stories were the backbone of Sumerian identity, recited in temples' homes and during rituals that shaped daily life. The storyteller shifts seamlessly into another tale, this one of Inanna, the radiant goddess of love and war. He describes her as fierce yet beautiful, capable of blessing fields with abundance one day and unleashing storms of conflict the next. Children gasp when he recounts how she descended into the underworld, passing through 7 gates, shedding her garments one by one. One boy whispers loudly, "She should have kept at least one." The crowd chuckles and the storyteller pauses, side-eyeing the boy with theatrical disapproval. Joke number 1 lands with effortless charm. The night deepens, stars blinking awake one by one. The stories thicken like ink, darkening on a tablet. Now he tells of Enki, the wise trickster god, whose cleverness saves humanity again and again. He recounts how Enki gave civilization its essential arts, metalwork, weaving agriculture, and how the gods sometimes regretted giving humans such energetic gifts. You imagine Enki smirking as he hides behind a palm tree, watching humans misuse his inventions with enthusiasm. As if reading your thoughts, the storyteller adds, "And so, Enki sighed, for he knew humans would always find creative ways to break the things they valued most." Laughter ripples through the crowd. Historians still argue whether these myths were recited primarily for instruction or for ritual, whether they were strictly temple material or woven into every level of society. Yet sitting here now, it feels obvious the stories belong to everyone. They hang in the air, passing from mouth to ear, from elder to child, from generation to generation like a living inheritance. The storyteller raises his hands, summoning silence. His voice dips lower, richer, like the hum of an ancient drum. Now he speaks of heroes of Gilgamesh, king of Uruk. Your skin tingles. You've heard whispers of him already in the way the guards spoke of strength, in the way the citizens look upon their city walls with pride. But here in this story he becomes more than flesh. He becomes possibility, shadow, longing. The storyteller recounts Gilgamesh's unmatched strength, his restlessness, his friendship with the wild man Enkidu. And when Enkidu appears in the tale, hair wild strides massive heart. Untamed, the children scoot closer, their eyes bright. You can almost feel the earth shake beneath the storyteller's voice. When he reaches the part where Gilgamesh outruns lions and strides through cedar forests with Enkidu at his side, a young girl gasps so loudly everyone turns. She claps a hand over her mouth, mortified. The audience breaks into warm laughter. Joke number 2 rises gently. Even mythic grandeur makes room for youthful enthusiasm. As the storyteller shifts into the tale of the Bull of Heaven, a creature unleashed by a wrathful goddess, you feel the collective tension build. His voice becomes deep thunder. His arms carve the shape of the beast into the air. The crowd leans forward. Children grip their parents' arms. And just as the story reaches its dramatic crescendo, a goat from the shadows lets out a sudden indignant bleat. The entire circle jolts. Someone squeals. The storyteller closes his eyes, lifts a hand toward the heavens and says, "Even now, the Bull of Heaven interrupts us." The crowd erupts in laughter. Joke number 3 lands so perfectly that even the goat seems pleased with itself. When the laughter settles, the storyteller continues, his voice winding like a breeze through reeds. The myths shift into gentler tales, creation stories, songs of shepherd gods, parables about bravery and foolishness. He recites lines believed to have been taught in the earliest temple schools, where children learned the rhythm of divine names before they learned to write their own. Some stories carry the quiet ache of mortality. Others flicker with the sparks of humor and hope. You notice a pattern: these stories comfort the frightened, embolden the timid, warn the reckless, and console the grieving. They carve meaning where life feels chaotic. They hold the world together more tightly than any wall or weapon. A fringe tidbit brushes the edge of your thoughts. Archaeologists have found tiny clay figurines, deliberately broken and scattered in ritual contexts, suggesting stories were sometimes enacted and symbolically released into the world. Looking at the children waving their hands as they act out scenes beside the storyteller, you suspect that tradition began long before any tablet was inscribed. As the final tale fades into silence, the storyteller bows. Lamps flicker as a cool wind drifts across the courtyard. People rise slowly, reluctant to leave the cocoon of shared imagination. Some linger repeating lines under their breath. Others hum fragments of melodies woven into the stories. You stand feeling the night settling gently on your shoulders. These stories do not end when spoken. They follow you. They follow everyone. They drift through dreams, shape decisions, lay foundations for temples, inspire kings, and comfort laborers beneath the harsh sun. You walk into the deepening night, guided by the sacred stories that now walk beside you, whispering reminders that humans have always reached toward the divine, not with certainty, but with wonder. Ahead you hear the faint rhythm of water and tools, the world of farmers and fishers calling you. Next, reminding you that sacred tales coexist with muddy fields and unpredictable floods. You leave the storyteller's courtyard with the echo of divine adventures still ringing in your ears, but the night carries another rhythm now, a softer, steadier pulse that guides you toward the quieter outskirts of Uruk. When dawn drips slowly over the horizon, like honey poured from a jar, you find yourself walking along fields soaked in amber light. The sacred tales are still warm in your chest, but here the world hums with a different truth. Gods may shape destinies, but farmers, fishers, and the fickle floods shape survival. The fields stretch wide and shimmering before you, bordered by canals that glisten like polished obsidian in the morning sun. Farmers move across the land in slow, purposeful arcs, bending, lifting, wading, guiding oxen through mud that squelches pleasantly under their sandals. You approach one such farmer, an older man with a back curved like a crescent moon from a lifetime of coaxing life from soil. He nods politely as you draw closer. His hands are thick with calluses, nails packed with earth. He gestures toward the sky as though explaining a secret treaty between heaven and farmland. A mainstream historical fact roots itself beneath your feet. Sumerians practiced advanced irrigation agriculture, relying on intricate canal networks to water barley flax and date palms. Their calendars were tuned to the changing moods of the rivers, marking seasons by the rise and fall of floodwaters. Without this agricultural backbone, all the temple's trades and tales would collapse like drying clay. You walk beside the farmer as he guides a wooden plow pulled by an ox that seems deeply offended by early mornings. The beast huffs loudly, casting judgmental glances at anyone who dares cheer for its progress. Its ears flick with theatrical annoyance. You grin, offering a sympathetic pat on its flank. The ox responds with a snort so forceful that a splash of mud lands squarely on your shin. Joke number 1 falls into place, delivered with bovine precision. Children nearby scatter grain for birds, though the birds, clever little opportunists, seem more interested in the children's giggles than the food. A young girl pauses to inspect you with big, unblinking eyes, then proudly shows off a frog she's caught in a small clay jar. Her brother rolls his eyes dramatically and mutters, "That's her future husband." You stifle a laugh as she chases him with the jar. As you continue walking, the fields transition into marshland. Reeds sway in the morning breeze, whispering secrets in their gentle rustle. Fishers dot the riverbanks, their boats carved from wood and sealed with bitumen. You watch one fisherman cast a net with practiced elegance, its spread blooming like a flower on the water's surface before sinking. Another fisherman hauls up a fish so large it thrashes violently, nearly pulling him into the river. His friends cheer as he regains his footing, though one shouts, "Careful, that one looks like it's plotting revenge." The fisherman glares good-naturedly as the fish slaps him with its tail. Joke number 2 splashes to shore. A fringe tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Some early Sumerian fishers used clever floating cages woven from reeds to trap fish as the tide ebbed. Others used nets weighted with clay discs, ingeniously simple, surprisingly effective. Watching these fishermen cast, haul, grip, and laugh, you see these ancient traditions alive in every movement, every technique refined by countless dawns just like this one. You wander along the riverbank where women wash linens, banging them against smooth stones with rhythmic force. They gossip with vibrant enthusiasm, punctuating their conversation with gestures so expressive you suspect even the river carp understand the latest news. When one woman stands up too quickly and accidentally whacks herself in the face with a wet cloth, there's a stunned silence followed by collective laughter, hers included. She places a hand on her bruised pride and mutters something about the cloth having the spirit of a mule. Joke number 3 enters flapping like a mischievous sparrow. As midday warmth swells, you walk with a shepherd who tends goats grazing near the edges of the floodplain. The animals bleat with extraordinary entitlement, nibbling anything within reach. Grass reads your tunic. You gently pry a stubborn goat's mouth from your hem while the shepherd laughs. He explains that goats were considered both useful and mildly unhinged traits that seem eternal across millennia. He shares stories of goats climbing temple ramps, stealing offerings, and once he swears this is true, sneaking into a council meeting. You suspect he's not exaggerating, but beneath the humor lies tension. You notice how the farmers glance nervously at the river's edge. The water sits higher than usual, its surface trembling with an energy that feels unpredictable. Floods here can be generous, gifting fertile silt that rejuvenates the fields. But they can also be ruthless, swallowing entire harvests with cold indifference. Historians still argue whether the Sumerians developed their extensive irrigation networks in response to increasing flood unpredictability, or as proactive management of a naturally volatile landscape. You watch a group of workers reinforcing an embankment, their movements quick, urgent, suggesting the answer might be both. As afternoon wanes, you join a group transporting clay jars filled with freshly caught fish toward Uruk. The jars sway on poles carried across their shoulders, sloshing softly. A young man stumbles, nearly dropping his load. His companion steadies him with a sharp elbow and a muttered, "Don't feed the earth spirits today, they're picky eaters." The comment reminds you how interwoven nature and belief are in this world. Every gust of wind, every shift in the river, every unusually shaped cloud feels like a conversation with the unseen. You pause near a canal where workers use large shovels to clear mud and debris. Their bodies move in unison, muscles glistening with sweat. Above them, a small wooden shrine shelters a clay figurine with wide, eternal eyes. Offerings of grain rest at its feet. You feel the humility of the moment. The workers know the canal is both their servant and their master. They shape it, yet it can easily defy them. A young boy brings water to the workers. His jar is enormous, far too heavy for his size, sloshing dangerously. He trips, sending a wave of water splashing across half the group. For a second, there is stunned silence. Then laughter. Then a mock ceremonial bow of forgiveness. You breathe in the warm, muddy scent of community. As the sun droops low, you sit beside the river and watch fishermen secure their last nets. Dragonflies dart over the water, their wings catching the fading light. The river glides past with quiet confidence, unhurried and ancient. You realize that the Sumerian world lives in constant dialogue with this water, its gifts, its threats, its demands. Sacred stories may describe cosmic battles and divine journeys, but here you see the stories that truly sustain life. Tales of patient farmers, watchful shepherds, resilient fishermen, ordinary people whose labor upholds the civilization rising behind you. And as dusk falls, the river reflects both stars and lamplight, merging heaven and earth into a single shimmering path. You rise and walk along it deeper into the beating heart of Sumer, where omens, medicine, and the mysteries of the human body await you next. Evening settles over the riverbanks like a woven cloak, dimming the water's silver shimmer until it becomes a soft ribbon in the dark. You leave behind the fields and fishing nets, stepping into a quieter, more intimate world. Here the hum of daily labor fades, and another sound rises in its place, a low chant, rhythmic and deliberate. It drifts from a narrow alley framed by mud brick walls. You follow it, drawn by curiosity, by caution, and by the faint, unmistakable scent of incense, heating gently in clay bowls. Tonight you enter the realm of healers' omens and quiet fear. The alley opens onto a small courtyard lit by 3 flickering oil lamps. Their glow dances over shelves lined with jars of herbs, dried roots, feathers, polished stones, and odd objects that glint with faintly unsettling promise. A healer works here, neither priest nor physician, yet holding authority that threads through both roles. She greets you with a nod, her dark eyes sharp as obsidian, her hands stained with crushed plants. She wipes them on a cloth and motions for you to sit on a reed mat beside her patient, a young man with a swollen ankle wrapped in mud and leaves. A mainstream historical fact whispers through the shadows. The Sumerians developed some of the world's earliest medical texts listing symptoms, prescriptions, and diagnoses. Their healing blended practical remedies with spiritual rituals, reflecting the belief that illness often began in the unseen world before sinking into flesh. The healer presses her palm to the boy's skin, murmuring words. You scarcely catch part guidance, part prayer, part instruction. With her free hand, she stirs a mixture in a shallow bowl, crushed bark, oil, and mud. The scent is earthy and sharp. She applies it carefully, her movements steady. Then she leans closer and mutters, "Next time tell him not to jump off the date palm." The boy's father grimaces. You smile. Joke number 1 tiptoes into the lamplight, lightening the sting of worry. Your attention drifts to a set of clay tablets arranged near the wall. Their edges are worn smooth, filled with neat cuneiform lines, documenting everything from fevers to broken bones to mysterious pains blamed on spirits. One tablet lists a curious remedy involving beer, honey, and crushed garlic. An odd but fascinating combination. A fringe tidbit slips into your thoughts, some Sumerian treatments paired herbs, with rituals requiring the healer to whisper incantations directly into the patient's ear, as if knowledge itself might slip inside and reorganize the body. Nearby, a second healer prepares a charm. He takes a small figurine carved from clay human-shaped, but with exaggerated eyes and hands, and wraps it in a strip of linen. He whispers a protective phrase before placing it in a jar filled with fragrant reeds. The jar's lid is tied with twine. You watch, fascinated. He explains that the charm absorbs a patient's illness, drawing it away like a sponge soaking water. This one is for a woman who dreams of snakes curling around her. He adds quietly, "Dreams speak truth." You nod, unsure whether he means psychological truth or a cosmic warning. A boy appears, clutching a chicken by the legs. He thrusts it toward the healer with wide, frantic eyes. For the omen reading, he insists. The healer sighs deeply, the kind of sigh that comes from someone who has already plucked too many chickens in a single lifetime. But he takes the bird with solemn professionalism. "You can't help yourself," you whisper. "Poor chicken." The boy widens his eyes and replies earnestly, "Don't worry, it likes the attention." Joke number 2, flaps into the moment. You follow the healer to another room where omens are read. Signs drawn not from chicken sacrifice, the bird seems safe for now, but from clay tablets, incense patterns, and celestial observations. A priest joins them, tracing symbols in ash spread across the floor. He hums under his breath, turning his head toward the window where the rising moon throws pale light. The connection between illness and omen is fluid here, the boundary between body and fate permeable. Historians still argue whether omens were used more as guidance for major political decisions or as tools for everyday life. Watching the priest examine faint cracks in a heated clay bowl, claiming to read divine inclinations in its patterns, you suspect it served every purpose imaginable. Humans do not draw neat lines between fear and hope. When the unknown presses close, any language that explains the dark feels worth listening to. You return to the main courtyard and find a woman sitting with her young daughter. The girl clutches her stomach, wincing. The healer gives her a warm mixture of mashed dates and herbs, soothing the pain with gentle words. Then she produces a clay figurine of a sheep and asks the child to hold it. "Tell the sheep your pain," she says. The girl whispers seriously into its ear. When she finishes, the healer tucks the figurine away. "There," she says, "the sheep will carry it now." The girl smiles, reassured. You swallow the lump rising in your throat. Healing is not only medicine, it is comfort. Beside you, a man sits cross-legged, holding a jar containing a small live frog. He explains that the healer will release the frog into the fields after whispering the patient's symptoms to it, so the ailment wanders away with the creature. Before you can form a response, the frog kicks its tiny legs vigorously and nearly escapes. The man scrambles after it, slipping in the dust and flailing dramatically. The healer catches the frog with swift, expert grace before lifting one eyebrow at the man. Joke number 3 hops elegantly into the story. As you watch the healers work, you notice something striking. None of them rush. Illness, pain, uncertainty. All these things are met with patience, ritual, and care. There is fear here, yes. Fear of fevers, spirits, unpredictable weather, childbirth, and wounds that do not close. But there is also gentleness, empathy, the belief that no suffering should be carried alone. The night grows deeper. Oil lamps burn low. The courtyard fills with the mingled sounds of quiet murmurs, rustling cloth, and the soft crackle of healing fires. You rise slowly, your body warmed by the glow of the lamps, your mind softened by witnessing the earliest blend of medicine and magic. As you step back into the cool night air, the world around you feels fragile yet profoundly human. These healers with their herbs and charms stand at the edge of uncertainty, holding the community together with knowledge passed from hand to hand, heart to heart. Ahead you sense another world waiting workshops where fire shapes beauty, where artisans breathe life into clay, metal, and stone. You follow the faint chime of tools ready to walk into the next craft of civilization. The night air cools your skin as you leave the courtyard of healing behind, but the faint scent of crushed herbs follows you like a blessing. You walk toward a softer light, warm golden flickering like a heartbeat. The sound reaches you next, the clinking of metal, the rasp of stone, the tapping of wood. These sounds do not clash like the hammering of weapons from the bronze forges. Here the rhythm is gentler, steadier, almost melodic. You follow it through winding alleys until the city opens into a broad, torchlit district, alive with motion. This is the realm of artisans, where the breath of craft turns raw materials into wonder. You enter a courtyard framed by workshops of different shapes and purposes. Each one spills light onto the street, revealing glimpses of creation in progress. The first workshop draws you with the glow of flames licking the inside of a stone-lined kiln. Potters gather around it, their faces bright with anticipation. One lifts a bell-shaped jar from the heat using clay-wrapped hands and sets it on a flat stone. The jar crackles softly as it cools its surface, still warm and slightly soft. You run a finger lightly across its smooth curve, feeling the delicate artistry in every grain. A mainstream historical fact whispers in your mind. Sumerians developed sophisticated ceramic techniques, producing finely crafted jars, bowls, and vessels with complex designs long before many other cultures mastered the same skills. Their pottery was not just functional, it carried symbols of identity, religion, and trade, shaping the daily life of an entire civilization. A young potter, his hair tied back with a strip of linen, sits at a foot-powered wheel. He wets his hands, places a lump of clay at the center, and begins to spin. The wheel hums softly. His palms guide the clay upward, coaxing it into a tall vessel with a flared lip. But when he leans back proudly, his elbow knocks the vessel sideways, collapsing it into a wobbling mound. His eyes widen. His fellow potters burst into laughter while he sighs dramatically, muttering something equivalent to, "The gods test me with clay." You smile. Joke number 1 spins into shape. You wander to the next workshop where metalworkers craft delicate ornaments. Unlike the booming forges that produce weapons, this place smells of polished copper and warm wax. A woman holds a thin copper wire with practiced ease, bending it into a spiral that glints like the curl of a god's beard. Jewelry lies scattered around her bracelets, etched with zigzags, earrings shaped like crescents, filigreed beads shaped like tiny birds. She offers you one bead to inspect. It is warm from her touch, smooth as river stone, and small enough to disappear in your palm. You marvel at the skill required to make something so delicate. A fringe tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Archaeologists have uncovered Sumerian workshops where artisans used lost wax casting techniques, the earliest known examples in human history, to create intricate metal objects. The mixture of innovation and creativity here was far ahead of its time. At another table, two craftsmen carve ornate cylinder seals. Their tools are sharp, their concentration fierce. They chisel tiny symbols into stone, with the patience of people who understand that one misaligned mark can warp an entire story. One seal depicts a lion leaping across waves. Another shows lines of cuneiform text framed by stars. A nervous apprentice attempts his first seal nearby, tongue peeking from the corner of his mouth. When he accidentally carves what appears to be a very confused-looking sheep, he looks devastated. His mentor pats his shoulder and says, "It can be a cloud, or a spirit, or a fluffy god." The apprentice perks up instantly. Joke number 2 emerges light-hearted and reassuring. Further down the lane you find the sculptors. Their workshop is filled with half-formed statues, gods with broad shoulders, kings with wide staring eyes, animals so detailed they seem ready to leap from their pedestals. Chisels strike stone with soft, deliberate thwacks. A sculptor gestures for you to approach. He shows you a small statue of an offering figure, hands clasped, eyes wide and perpetual. He explains that such figures reflect devotion, eternal watchers, who stand in temples on behalf of worshippers too busy or too distant to attend daily rituals. Historians still argue whether the wide-eyed statues represented humility, attentiveness, or simply a stylistic convention. Looking at them now, their frozen expressions stretched between reverence and alarm, you suspect the answer is both. They hold the weight of devotion and the uncertainty of a world ruled by unseen forces. You leave the sculptor and step into a workshop where textiles come alive. The room bursts with color, reds, golds, blues, deep greens. Women sit at looms, their fingers flying across threads with astonishing speed. The rhythmic clatter of wooden beams becomes a gentle accompaniment to their conversation. A young weaver proudly shows you a patterned cloth representing waves, mountains, and flourishes that mimic the movement of wind. When she raises the cloth for you to admire, she accidentally smacks the woman beside her in the face. "By the gods," the woman sputters, rubbing her cheek. "Warn me before summoning a storm." Everyone laughs. Joke number 3 weaves itself into existence. As you wander deeper, the scent of carved wood and drying paint leads you toward a small room where an artisan decorates ceremonial masks. Each mask is distinct, some fierce, some serene, some whimsical. He explains that masks are used in rituals, invoking divine presence or protection. One mask in particular catches your attention, painted in reds and blacks, its expression a perfect mix of wisdom and mischief. It reminds you of Enki, the trickster god. You touch its surface lightly, feeling the faint ridges left by the artisan's brush. The sun drifts lower. Workshops glow with warm lamplight as the day winds down. Artisans begin to clean their tools, wrap finished goods, and store raw materials. The courtyard fills with soft chatter. Someone passes around small cups of beer. Someone else hums a tune reminiscent of a lullaby. Even as exhaustion spills across their features, pride lifts their voices. You realize something profound. These artisans shape not just tools and ornaments, but identity. Their work influences trade, ritual, architecture, storytelling. Every object crafted here, vessel, seal, statue, cloth, becomes a thread in the tapestry of civilization. As twilight thickens, you step back into the street. Behind you, the artisans extinguish their lamps one by one, their creations cooling their hands, resting their craft, waiting for the next dawn. Ahead, you hear laughter and the clatter of dishes, households awakening to their evening routines. Love conflict, family rituals, whispered secrets, all waiting in the homes of Sumer. You follow the path toward them, ready to step into rooms where daily life unfolds with the intimacy of shared bread and the universality of human hearts. The last artisan's lamp flickers out behind you, and the night deepens into a soft, velvet hush, broken only by the distant murmur of Uruk's streets. You follow a winding lane lined with low, mud-brick houses, each one glowing from within like a small, patient heart. Hear the thunder of forging the chants of healing, and the bustle of markets fade into something gentler. This is the hidden pulse of Sumer the home. And tonight you step into its warmth, where love, laughter, and household havens reveal the quiet miracles that keep civilizations alive. You pause at a doorway draped with a reed curtain. A woman pulls it open and gestures you inside with a welcoming tilt of her head. The air greets you with the scent of baked barley bread and simmering stew rich with onions and herbs. A clay lamp rests in a niche carved into the wall, its flame steady. The room is modest but cozy. Woven mats, a few wooden stools, jars stacked neatly along one side, and a sleeping area in a corner raised slightly on a platform of packed clay. A young boy dashes past you, nearly tripping over his own enthusiasm. His sister chases after him, wielding a wooden spoon with exaggerated menace. Their mother sighs and mutters something you suspect translates to, "If only the gods granted peace indoors." Joke number 1 scampers across the floor with them. The father of the house sits cross-legged repairing a reed basket. He motions for you to join him and proudly shows off his handiwork. The weaving is tight, the pattern symmetrical. He explains that families often make their own storage baskets, cooking bowls, even simple toys. Hands must work even when the sun rests, he says. His wife responds from the hearth, except his hands rest too often. He grins sheepishly, and she tosses him a piece of bread. A mainstream historical fact settles gently into the scene. Sumerian households were typically multi-generational, with grandparents, parents, children, and even cousins living under one roof. Domestic labor was shared. Women cooked and managed storage, men repaired tools and tended livestock, and children learned by mimicking everyone with relentless enthusiasm. You eat with them, dipping bread into a fragrant stew. The children pepper you with questions about where you've been, what you've seen, whether you've met Gilgamesh himself. One girl insists she saw the hero once just over there buying figs. Her brother rolls his eyes so vigorously you worry they might fall out. After the meal, the family gathers around a low table where small clay figurines sit arranged in a circle. Sheep-goats, a very rotund bull, and one lopsided woman figurine who appears permanently startled. The children use them to act out a myth, switching voices as they go. In their version, the gods argue over who gets the best fish stew, and one god storms off because someone forgot to invite him. You laugh softly. Joke number 2 nestles between their giggles. Later you step outside and wander to the courtyard shared by several neighboring families. A group of women grind grain on stone slabs, chatting animatedly about who's courting whom, whose goat escaped again, and which neighbor has the most enviable store of dates. A teenage girl blushes as her name surfaces in the conversation. She waves her hands dismissively, while everyone smirks with warm familiarity. Historians still argue whether marriages in Sumer were driven primarily by economic negotiation or personal choice. Listening to these women, you suspect, both forces intertwined practical concerns wrapped in undeniable emotion. One woman reminisces about how she met her husband when he accidentally dropped an entire basket of fish on her feet. "I smelled like the river for a week," she says, "but he brought me figs every day to apologize." Everyone sighs in unison. The courtyard fills with laughter as an elderly man shuffles outside, complaining loudly that no one respects a man trying to nap. Someone teases him that the gods themselves tremble when he snores. He huffs, though a smile creeps beneath his beard. Joke number 3 creaks into existence like an old friend. You walk to another home where a new mother rocks her infant, humming softly. She invites you to sit. The baby's tiny fingers curl instinctively around yours, warm and impossibly delicate. Beside her, a midwife recounts the precariousness of childbirth, of how offerings are made to protect both mother and child. A fringe tidbit surfaces. Sumerians believed certain protective charms, often shaped like fish birds or odd hybrid creatures, could ward away spirits that preyed on vulnerable newborns. One such charm hangs above the cradle, now a clay plaque etched with swirling patterns. Night deepens, but the city's homes glow brighter in their quiet rituals. A father teaches his son to shape a small clay bull. A grandmother tells gently embellished stories of the old days, each memory slightly shinier than the last. A group of neighbors gather to share beer brewed earlier that week, its earthy flavor thick and slightly sour. They toast to the river, the fields, the gods, and to each other. You wander among them, sensing how households anchor the civilization around you. These moments, the teasing, the chores, the meals, the whispers shared between couples, the sighs of tired grandparents, are the threads that hold everything together. Without these small sanctuaries, no temple, no forge, no city could endure. As you walk back toward the main street, lamps sway in the warm breeze, casting dancing shadows along the walls. You feel the heartbeat of Sumer not in its monumental ziggurats or bustling markets, but here in the simple moments where people love, argue, dream, and rest. Ahead, the wind shifts. The night grows heavier. Something changes in the air, subtle but unmistakable. You feel the distant ache of drought, the quiet rumble of foreign footsteps, the tremor of shifting soil. And so you continue your steps, carrying you toward a future where Sumer's bright glow begins to dim beneath shifting skies. A quiet heaviness settles across the city as you leave the warmth of household laughter behind. The night feels cooler now, the breeze less playful, its edges sharp with something unspoken. Even Uruk's familiar hum seems muted, like the city itself holds its breath. You walk slowly along a canal whose waters once shimmered with abundance. Now, in the moon glow, the surface looks dull opaque. The reeds whisper restlessly. You feel it, the slow turning of a great wheel, the shift of fate beneath your feet. Sumer stands strong, but the signs of strain gather like distant storm clouds. Decline begins not with a single catastrophe, but with 1,000 quiet fractures beneath shifting skies. The first fracture lies in the soil. Farmers gather at the fields at dawn, staring uneasily at the pale crust forming atop the earth. Salt. Thin, shimmering, stubborn salt. It clings to the soil like a spiteful spirit drying the ground until barley stalks wilt long before harvest. A mainstream historical fact presses into your thoughts. Repeated irrigation without proper drainage caused severe salinization in ancient Sumer, reducing crop yields and forcing shifts in agriculture. Barley replacing wheat fields, abandoned families displaced. You kneel, running your fingers across the salty grains. They scratch like sand. Farmers mutter among themselves, some blame the gods, others blame the canals, others the city for demanding more grain than the land can sustain. One farmer kicks the ground in frustration. A puff of white dust rises and settles right in his beard. He sneezes explosively, startling a nearby flock of geese. The geese honk indignantly, flapping in outrage. Joke number 1 waddles gracelessly into place. You walk toward the canals. Workers labor tirelessly to dredge them, but the mud seems thicker, heavier, more reluctant to yield. One man grumbles that the river spirits have grown lazy. Another retorts that perhaps it's they who've grown lazy. They glare, then break into weary laughter. Yet beneath their banter lies fear. Water is becoming unpredictable. Drought years stretch longer. Floods arrive out of season. The balance that sustained Sumer for centuries begins to wobble. Historians still argue whether climate change or human mismanagement played the larger role in Sumer's environmental decline. Standing here, you feel the uneasy truth, nature, and humanity dance together, and when one falters, the other stumbles. You move deeper into the city. Temples remain magnificent, but their storerooms seem less full than before. Priests whisper among themselves as offerings dwindle. A woman arrives with only a handful of barley, where once she brought baskets. She apologizes, voice trembling. The priest blesses her gently, but his eyes betray worry. In the Eanna district, officials gather, their faces tight with tension. Two men argue over declining grain stores. Tax less, one insists, or the people will starve. Tax more, the other argues, or the temple will starve. They stare, breath steaming in the cool morning air. Neither finds comfort in the other's reasoning. A fringe tidbit slips into your mind. Archaeologists have found evidence of desperate measures, new canals dug hastily. Fields rotated erratically, grain hoarded or smuggled. You sense those measures unfolding now as people try to wrest control from forces too vast to command fully. You wander toward the city gates where dust rises in strange patterns. Foreign voices echo. A caravan of unfamiliar people stands just beyond the wall tribes from the north and east. Their clothing coarse, their weapons bronze, but clearly shaped by different hands. They watch Uruk with hungry curiosity. Trade once flowed freely across these lands, but now suspicion lines every face. A guard lifts his spear, calling for caution. One trader from the foreign caravan lifts his hands to show peace, then reaches for a water skin. Unfortunately, the water skin bursts, spraying its entire contents directly into the guard's face. The guard sputters, blinking through dripping water. Silence falls, then the newcomers break into embarrassed apologies. The guard mutters something like, "At least it was clean water." Joke number 2 drips gently into the dust. Yet the humor cannot hide the truth. Migrations are shifting. People displaced by drought or conflict push southward. City-states once accustomed to rivalry now face incursions they can no longer predict. Walls rise higher. Patrols grow more frequent. The night carries unfamiliar footsteps. Uruk is still powerful, but its grip loosens. Beyond the city, the plains stir with rumors. You hear whispers of the Gutians, highland tribes, whose raids unsettle even the most fortified cities. Some call them barbarians. Others claim they are merely hungry people seeking fertile land. Historians still argue whether the Gutians' role was catastrophic or exaggerated. Some texts paint them as chaos incarnate, others as convenient scapegoats for deeper structural decline. You travel along a dusty road connecting Uruk to Lagash. The fields here lie patchy, some flourishing, others abandoned. Villages feel quieter. You meet a family loading their belongings onto a donkey, their possessions wrapped in cloth. They explain they're leaving for a region farther north, hoping for fresher soil. The father forces a smile. The mother holds a clay jar that clinks softly, her last batch of beer brewed from barley, grown in the days before the soil turned. She offers you a sip. It tastes smoky and faintly bitter, like memory dissolving in your mouth. Further along, you pass a half-built shrine. A lone builder sits beside it, head in his hands. He explains that funds for the project dried up. No one has the surplus to donate now. He looks at the unfinished walls, shoulders slumping. To cheer him, you pick up a stray brick and attempt to place it atop the wall. It immediately topples over, bouncing off the builder's foot. He yelps, then bursts into laughter. Perhaps the gods decided this shrine should wait. Joke number 3 rises from rubble and restores a little hope. As twilight deepens, you return toward Uruk. Smoke curls from the city in thin columns, cooking fires. Kiln heat may be a few controlled burnings of dry reeds. The glow still shimmers, but you sense strain behind its light. And yet, there is resilience too. People repair canals. Priests pray. Farmers sprinkle last handfuls of seed. Children play in the dust, their laughter stubbornly unbroken. Civilizations do not fall in a single night. They dim, flicker, waver, yet still they breathe. You walk among these breaths, the fading glow of Sumer warm against your skin. Ahead, memories and legacies gather like embers ready to spark anew. Even as darkness edges closer, you feel the world turning, and you walk with it toward the echoes that will outlive the fall. The road leading back toward Uruk feels softer beneath your feet than ever before, almost tender, as though the ground itself knows the story approaching its final arc. The sky stretches wide above you, a pale wash of morning light that reveals both the scars and the strength of the land. You inhale deeply. The air tastes of dust, river mist, and something else, a faint sweetness like memory carried on the wind. You sense it. You are walking not only through a place, but through the echo of an entire world. The twilight of Sumer hums gently around you, urging you forward. As you enter the outskirts of the city, familiar sounds greet you, vendors calling potters, shaping clay, children laughing as they chase goats who absolutely do not wish to be chased. Yet something is different. A kind of reflective quiet hides beneath the noise like a soft pulse behind a drum's surface. The markets are still busy, but fewer traders crowd the lanes. The river still glitters, but its waterline has drifted lower. The temples still stand tall, but their whitewashed walls bear cracks that weren't there before. Uruk remains magnificent, but now its brilliance flickers, not fading completely, but trembling. You walk to a terrace overlooking the great city. From here you can see the vast sweep of streets, canals, ziggurats, workshops, and homes. And as you watch, you notice how the past and present blend. The same clay bricks shaped beneath ancient hands still hold the weight of the sun. The same river that guided early settlers still carves its way gently toward the sea. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind even after political power shifted. And even as rival empires rose and fell, Sumerian culture endured, its language, stories, and innovations echoing through Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian civilizations for centuries. It did not vanish. It transformed. A small group approaches nearby elders who often gather here in the mornings. One greets you warmly and settles beside you, gazing out over the rooftops. "The world changes," he murmurs, but Clay remembers. His voice carries wisdom, both weary and hopeful. A younger man sitting with him rolls his eyes and says, "He says that about everything, even my sandals." The elder chuckles. "Your sandals should remember. They've seen you trip too many times." The younger man huffs, and you smile. Joke number one sits comfortably between them like an old friend. You walk with them down the terrace steps and into the city proper. A group of scribes passes, carrying tablets filled with tallies of offerings, royal decrees, and grain shipments. Their footsteps echo through the hall. One scribe mutters to another, "If I see one more tablet about water allocation, I'm going to throw myself into a canal." The other pats his back sympathetically. "If you do, at least take the tablet with you." Joke number two scribbles itself neatly into the moment. You pause at a shrine where a woman places a cluster of dried flowers at the feet of a clay goddess. She whispers a prayer, not for abundance or success, but for remembrance. "May the future know we were here," she murmurs. Her words brush your skin like a breeze. And you understand the people sense the shifting world, the rising powers beyond their borders, the slow dimming of their great cities. Yet they do not bow to despair. They look forward as much as backward. A fringe tidbit surfaces gently some later. Mesopotamian inscriptions reference Sumer not as a vanished world, but as the land of learned traditions, a place whose memory shaped the very identity of later peoples. Even centuries later, the name Sumer carried prestige. You walk toward the Grand Eanna district, where workers reinforce the outer walls of a temple. They chatter while mixing clay and straw, gossiping about neighbors and debating which god favors which city-state. One man dramatically insists that his goat is descended from a divine herd. Another retorts, "Your goat eats everything including sacred offerings. If it's divine, it's the god of chaos." The whole group bursts into loud laughter. Joke number 3 bleats happily into the dusty air. And then something softens. You hear a distant flute, its notes drifting like falling feathers. You follow the sound to a quiet courtyard, where a solitary musician sits beside a small garden. His music is slow, mournful, but not bitter. "I play for those who came before us," he says, when he notices you watching, "and for those who will follow." He taps the edge of his flute. Stories live longer than people. Songs live longer than stones. You sit beside him, letting the melody seep into you. In that quiet space, you feel the truth. The world around you is shifting. Yes, but nothing truly disappears. Cultural memory doesn't break, it transforms. As dusk gathers, you walk toward the Ziggurat, its layers glowing orange in the fading light. The steps feel heavy beneath your feet, but at the summit, a breeze greets you warm and steady. The city stretches below a tapestry woven from thousands of lives, and in that moment, the past, present, and future converge in a single breath. You sense the coming eras, Acadia rising, Babylon stirring, Assyria swelling like a storm, and yet Sumer remains at their root, its innovations spiraling outward, writing law, mathematics, irrigation, mythology. Its echoes ripple through empires, eras, and minds yet unborn. You stand at the edge of the tower and let the wind carry your thoughts outward, toward deserts that will swallow cities, toward rivers that will alter course, toward future scholars who will brush dust from broken tablets and rediscover these people. Sumer fades, yes, but never fully. Its footsteps remain pressed into the soft clay of human history. And with the sky deepening to violet, you descend the steps one last time, letting the echoes settle around you like a final embrace. The night gathers softly as you walk away from the Ziggurat, and the city's lights flicker like embers caught between breaths. The sounds that once roared around you, markets, forges, riverboats' laughter, now fade into gentler hums, as though the world itself has slipped into a calmer rhythm. Your footsteps slow. The air thickens with warmth. Even the breeze seems to move with longer, quieter strokes. You wander toward the riverbank. The water glides past in smooth, unbroken ribbons, mirroring the stars that drift overhead. The reeds sway only slightly now, brushing together like whispers meant for no one in particular. You sit at the edge of the bank, feeling the cool clay beneath your hands, its surface holding the memory of countless feet that rested here long before you. In this softened darkness, the weight of everything you've witnessed settles comfortably on your shoulders. Cities rising, stories blooming, tools shaping worlds, families gathering around small fires, the quiet fears, the stubborn hopes, the endless labor, the endless wonder. It all drifts together here, blending like silt in the river, slowly drifting toward tomorrow. You breathe slowly, letting the air expand gently through your chest. The scent of warm earth and distant incense lingers familiar and comforting. The river murmurs steady, patient, unhurried. The night sky arches above you with vast, forgiving clarity. And now, as you rest in the cool hush of this ancient place, feel your muscles ease and your thoughts unfurl. Let them drift with the river softer and farther away, until only calm remains. The world grows quiet around you. The air grows warm. The stars blink slowly as though drowsy. You are safe here, wrapped in the soft cradle of a civilization long past yet never lost.